In order. First item is roll call.
Alderman Arnold.
Here.
Alderman Bammon.
Present.
Alderman Coleman.
Here.
Alderman Headley.
Here.
Alderman Totten. Here. Alderman West. We have a quorum.
Next item is the invocation led by Darrell Jones at Crossroads Church, followed by Pledge of Allegiance for Alderman Arnold.
Let's pray together. We give you thanks tonight, Father, for, again, just life and breath, for freedom, and for community, and for what this community represents. I do just want to pray and intercede over the thousands and thousands in Houston and Southern Texas that are displaced right now and going through so many different things, but yet we see evidence that as a community they're coming together and working together and being cared for. So we just pray your protection over them over these upcoming weeks as a community. Give you thanks for the community that we have, for these leaders before us, the business before them tonight that needs to be transacted. God, I pray that that would go smoothly and easily and for the betterment not only of our community today, but for the future for us and for our children. We pray it all tonight in Jesus' name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item is the approval of the agenda.
No changes, Mr. Mayor.
All right. See no proclamations then, we'll move to citizens' participation. We ask the citizens who wish to address the board come forward to the podium and microphone and give your name and address for the record, please. Do we have anyone who wishes to address the board this evening?
My name is Rayfield Turner. I moved to this community 13 years ago. I found this community to be one of the most acceptable and most honorable communities in the United States. I travel all over. I've lived in almost every community in the Kansas City area, from Blue Springs on back. And each time I found myself moving, it was because I found that the law was not being obeyed. And I find that in our community, a community that I have high regards, I respect and I honor the chief of police. I believe we have the right man for the right job. When you talk to this man, he does not pass the buck to a patrolman. He goes and looks at himself. I have seen him when patrolmen were doing their job to get lawbreakers. I've seen him out watching his patrolmen to see that they do their job properly and maintain it. And our citizens are being made victims right now of contractors in this area. And I believe it is something that we need to address. And I have proof of what I am talking about. When we got contractors that do not respect our community and respect the laws of the Constitution of the United States, I think it's time that we do something about it. If we want to maintain the honor that Green Valley has come to have from other communities within the Kansas City area, I believe that we have to do our job as citizens. And we have to do our jobs, and we cannot do our jobs when citizens do not do their jobs to report to law enforcement when they see the law being broken. I believe that we cannot do our job, the officers of the community cannot do their job when people do not come to the office of this community and report or ask things that be done, and they be done in a proper manner. And I see that these things are slipping out from under our hands. I'm not here to point fingers at nobody, because we're all guilty. I had to search my conscience in order for me to be here. I talked it over with the chief, and I told him that I was not doing my job. And I have, since I talked to the chief, because I had a complaint, I have 15 pages of why I have not done my job and people have not done the job in this community, throughout this community and the United States. And it's getting to, we are almost at the point of where we was 156 years ago. Where was we at 156 years ago in this country? We we had a part of this country that wanted to divide this country and make it two. And we had a president that stood up to the people and for the people and said that this country will remain united. And we fought for it. We didn't fight for this slavery. We fought to unite this country and keep it as one. And it's our job to keep it that way. And I'm not going to let no contractor come into my community and start bringing in illegal workers. If you want to have a worker that comes from another country, at first, that worker, if he comes from a country, a citizen of that country, he respects the laws of that country. Why doesn't he respect the laws of the United States? Come into my country legally. Get a work permit if you want to work in this country. Get an application if you want to be in this country. For 60 to 70 years, we have had farm workers that worked in California, Arizona, Texas, and there has never been a problem. There have been documented workers throughout 60 to 70 years where there has never been a problem. People have been able to come across the border and work in this country, and there's never been a problem. Why do we have a problem now? It's because people don't care anymore. They're taking the law for granted. And there's two kinds of people right now in this country. There are those who respect the law and those who disregard the law. And when you disregard the law, you think, well, I'm getting something done. Well, if you're getting something done for somebody that you know is in this country illegal, you have a disregard for our laws. Are you here to uphold our laws? Well, let's work as a community. Let's uphold our laws. Let's not point fingers. Let's work together as a community. Am I right or wrong? Okay. What I'm saying is that I have proof of what I'm saying. I'm not making false accusations against anybody. I have a company that is probably snow blinded the chief like he tried to do me. He says he comes in here, he works as a contractor. Well, I don't know what's going on because I have some subcontractors doing the work for me. I don't know that they have illegal workers or workers that are not permitted to be in the country or have a work card to be in the country. I don't know what he says. He came to the chief, but I went behind and I investigated because that's what I did in the military. I was in the military. I worked at the defense missile sites in San Pedro, California, throughout California. It was my job to protect my country and do my job as a military soldier. And I did my job. Now, I want us to stop letting our community citizens be victims. I'm not blaming my citizens. I have picture after picture after picture of illegal work being done in our community that shouldn't have never been done. And I'm sick and tired of it. And I expect and I know that you officers of this board will do things about it. And when a company comes in here and tells you that, oh, well, I don't know what my subcontractors are doing. Well, how can there be subcontractors working for him when I went right behind him the next day and I investigated and I seen the workers go up to his pickup truck, his company truck, and ask him for tools? If he had a subcontractor, the subcontractor should have been provided tools for his workers. Am I right or wrong? I think I'm right. And I know I'm right. Maybe in certain instances where maybe a tool isn't available and he does ask the regular contractor, but why does the contractor be out on the job 5 to 6 times a day monitoring that job? That's because that is not subcontractor workers there. That's his workers work there. And then 2 days later, he told me he fired some of his workers. Well, if you got subcontractors, how can you be firing somebody? The subcontractor would have fired him. Am I right or wrong, Chief? You don't have to commit yourself. Because I committed it for you. Because I investigated. I didn't do your job for you. I did a job as a citizen of my community because I care about my neighbors being victimized. My neighbors don't know what's going on. They see workers out there. They don't know that the law says you have a right to go out and ask those workers, do you have a green card? Or the contractor, show me the I-9s of these workers working here. The office of each one of the officers that issue the building permits, the occupational license, they have a right to ask for I-9s. And if you get an I-9, you have an application to determine whether this citizen working on your house is a legal citizen of the United States. I know the law. I have 33 and a half years to prove what I know. And I'm sick and tired of people trying to take my community away. I don't have no place else to live. Green Valley is almost my last step in this area. If I move again, I might as well move out of this area. And Green Valley has been most gracious to me. This is a very fine officer. When you find an officer that you make a complaint to the chief of police, he takes it up on himself to go investigate it, then you know you got the right man. There is no doubt you picked the right man when you picked this man. He didn't wait. He didn't give it to a patrolman and say, go out and see what Ray Turner said. He went out himself and seen what I was saying. And he knows the law himself. He knew he had no right to ask those workers whether they under the law or not, because that's discrimination. And this is not about discrimination. This is about law and order within the United States of America. Respect my country. Did you respect the laws of your country before you came to the United States? Yes, you did. Why can't you respect us as citizens of the United States? Respect our laws. These laws are drawn up for each citizen of the United States. The preamble of the Constitution says it right on the first line. We the people, and we are the people. Make no doubt about it. We are the people. And if we're not the people, then why are we sitting here? I don't think any of you want to get up and move, because law and order. You have about 12 police officer cars out here right now. If you continue to let contractors come in here and perform illegal acts of work with illegal workers, 5 years from now, you will have 24 police officer cars out here. You won't have 12. You'll have 24. You'll have to double the amount. Because once you start letting illegal activity develop in your community, it will continue to grow. If you don't report it, it will even get worse faster. And the chief knows that. He cannot do his job if we, the people, don't ask him for help when we see the law being broken. He knows the job will not be done if he does not take it on himself to go out and investigate it.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I got to ask a couple questions and we need to move on now. I don't even know, what is our procedure if we get a complaint? I mean, is that really, maybe more of a question for Matt, I mean, is that really something, I mean, is that more of something that ICE needs to investigate? I mean,
Federal responsibility, immigration enforcement's federal responsibility.
I met with Mr. Turner. I was aware of concern. I went to the location, the sites where the individuals were. I took license numbers down, and I talked to the gentleman who's obviously the owner of that company. We discussed the rule that companies are under, that all workers must have appropriate work, all the information and complaints and concerns, and personally that was all through ICE and
so that would typically be our protocol for that then, if we get the...
That is the appropriate protocol. There are guidelines on how far a law enforcement officer can, a local can investigate suspected violations of immigration law. So that we can certainly, that's why we're allowed to pass that to those that do it on a full-time basis. And they're usually more interested in the company than they are in the individual. Yeah, they have all the information that I gathered from Mr. Turner. Statute property authorities have some authority in that venue item.
I want a few other points before I sit down. We have books. Once the federal government once cared about what we did as citizens. You look in these phone books, you don't find the office of the federal government there no more. No Immigration Bureau. If you want to get a number to the Immigration Bureau, you got to get a manual. You cannot even get a number to the Immigration Bureau from the operator of AT&T. They will not even give you the number anymore. We have from 2011 on back, where the government slowly but surely withdrew the offices of the federal government from the phone books. So you tell me, is it us not doing our job so the federal government cannot do their job, or is it the federal government are not doing their job? When the federal government can set up and pass laws or health care laws, and the House leader, Nancy Pelosi, stands up and says she don't even know what's in the bill, but she'll sign it anyway. What kind of leaders do we have in Washington? That's all I got to say.
Thank you. We have anyone else who wishes to address the board? Seeing none, move on to consent agenda.
Mayor, I move we accept the consent agenda.
I have a motion, Alderman West, to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second? Second, Alderman Arnold. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. Next up, under previous business, we have stop sign placement discussion.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, a while ago, several months ago probably, Alderman Arnold had inquired about some stop signage within some of the neighborhoods, and specifically we were talking about using it for to slow traffic down in thoroughfares that are longer without any traffic slowing devices out there. So we had Rick do some further research on it. I asked him to put a memo together just because there are federal guidelines that we follow based off of the MUTCD, and Rick is going to give us a presentation on his findings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Board. In front of you, you should have a memo that talks about kind of our study. I also included with your packet a copy of just a few excerpts from the MUTCD that kind of follows along with this memo towards the end. So to get started, basically the three intersections that I looked at were Montana Ridge and Stockman Drive, Montana Ridge and Hillsborough, and Nielsen and Leanne Drive. Kind of just going through the memo, it's probably the easiest way to do it. Going through the first paragraph of it, this data, what we do is we have a high-star piece of equipment. Essentially, it's kind of the size of an 8-inch tablet. We put it on the roadway. It's covered with a rubber mat. It's programmed to actually pick up traffic volumes, traffic speeds. The way it does it is it uses like a magnetic signature, so it can tell what type of vehicle it is based on the length that it when it crosses it, it can kind of tell how big that particular vehicle is, so it can tell the difference between a semi, a truck, or a car. It can also pick up the speeds. Picks up, it clicks off at a certain time of day, so it knows what time of day those vehicles are passing. So we get the traffic volumes, speeds, also collects things like temperature, whether or not it was raining. And then from there, when you go through the analysis of the MUTCD, it looks at other information, so that includes traffic accidents. We use it's a Missouri State Traffic Accident Report System, or a STAR system, that kind of keeps track of all the accidents at particular intersections. We had to go back 3 years for this particular study. The geometry of the roadway, which is also taken into effect when you look at all the conditions under the MUTCD. We do have the as-built from each one of those locations, so Snybar Farms, lots 1 through 4, so that's part of Nielsen and Leanne. And then we have Farmington Acres first and second plat that talks about shows us the geometry of Stockman and Hillsborough along Montana Ridge. We also have data in there for site distance, which we use with and I didn't give you a copy of it, but I can get you, I've got copies of it. But it's also the AASHTO Green Book, or the geometric manual that we go off of that talks about things like site distance. So anyway, going through the first intersection, again, just going through this memo, Montana Ridge and Stockman. If you were to jump toward the back, you kind of see each one of the conditions that's outlined in the MUTCD for traffic volumes. And under section 2B.04, I mean, we can get real specific, but basically It looks at traffic volumes, it looks at sight distance for maneuvering sight distance, stopping sight distance, and it looks at crash reports. There's also another section where you can actually look at whether or not type of crashes that you have, if whether or not you can reduce some of the traffic volumes required to meet a four-way stop condition. It also looks at the peak hour, in other words, is it the AM peak or the PM peak, and that's what you can use for traffic volumes with this study as well. And it looks at speed for the 85th percentile speed. Keep in mind it doesn't use that to determine if whether or not a sign is necessary. What it does is if vehicles are going 85, or if vehicles in the 85th percentile are going 40 miles an hour or faster, you can reduce the volumes by 70% of what's outlined in the manual. So basically, looking at Montana Ridge and Stockman, there were no accidents reported in the last 3 years. The sight distance conditions are met for the speeds, even the speeds in which people are actually going faster, the 35 miles an hour, for example. Traffic volumes don't meet the traffic volumes for the actual four-way stop condition. Keep in mind that there is these are stop controlled on what's called the minor roadway. So essentially, when you look at Montana Ridge is actually the major roadway just based on traffic volumes. And so Stockman, for example, is the minor roadway just based on traffic volumes. So when you look at the volumes going through the intersection and the purpose of a four-way stop, it's kind of analogous to the intersection out here with 40 Highway and Buckner-Tarsney. The traffic signal is there to make sure vehicles don't build up, and so you get traffic turning movements appropriately. And so the MUTCD does clearly state under one of the sections, which is why I handed this out, that you don't necessarily look at stop control for speed control. And I know we talked about this in the last meeting, but I just kind of want to make sure that we're aware that the purpose of the study is to see if whether or not traffic volumes coming into any of these intersections meet those conditions. And so if we go to Hillsborough and Montana Ridge, just kind of going down the line, the one condition that if you were to look at this and say, okay, well, this doesn't meet a certain condition, is if you're pulling out on Hillsborough going south on Montana Ridge. Keep in mind Montana Ridge is a north-south road. Hillsborough is an east-west road. If you're going south on Montana Ridge from Hillsborough, you could potentially have a sight distance issue if people are going 35 miles an hour, for example. The traffic counters did show that people were going 35, 38 in the 85th percentile. And so the question for Hillsborough is, are we going to keep it at 25 miles an hour? If it's posted at 25 and if it is enforced at 25, you have plenty of sight distance. Say we're going to post it at 30, for example, then you would recommend then a four-way stop because you don't have the sight distance for somebody traveling that fast. And so in that particular situation, it meets it if we're going to call it a 25 mile an hour road and we're going to enforce it at 25 miles an hour. And so I think another important factor, when you look at the geometry of Montana Ridge, for example, that portion when you come off the curve, off of Snibar, and when you get past Hillsborough and Stockman, that actual roadway is probably a 35 mile an hour design road. Now that's not uncommon. Typically what happens is when you look at a subdivision, a road comes in, it can become designed at 30, 35 miles, and you're going to post it less than what it's actually designed for. And that can happen for various reasons, maybe topography, but essentially your vertical and your horizontal curves, your sight distance is such that people feel comfortable driving a certain speed. And so I think you see Montana Ridge as a street that people feel comfortable driving faster than what it's posted. And so, one could make an argument that, well, the road's probably designed at 35, you could post at 30. I wouldn't recommend that, but that could be one of the reasons why people are driving faster. But again, it comes back to, do you want to keep it at 25, which is what I would recommend, and if you're going to enforce it at 25, then it meets the MUTCD requirements for the stop control condition that it has, with the stop signs being on Hillsborough and not on Montana Ridge.
This is strictly all residential, correct?
These are residential. Well, Montana Ridge is a residential collector,
Right.
and in these cases, Hillsborough and Stockman would just be considered residential streets. So,
Any school buses and kids in the street.
yeah, when I look at, for example, when I did the actual traffic volumes, I actually bumped it up a little bit because you're supposed to take not just the volumes of vehicles, but you're actually supposed to take the volumes of pedestrians as well as bicyclists. So I bumped it up 25% from what we actually had from the counters to account for that. And the reason being is because AASHTO has a manual that says if you've got people that are walking and biking or people that are driving cars, 25% of those trips could be cycling trips or walking trips. So if I just, without having somebody out there for the entire 48-hour study, counting how many bikes or how many people are walking, to make this assumption that 25% of the volume of vehicles is in the volume of pedestrian and bikes. And so that's also accounted for with the volume counts. Actually, unfortunately, when you look at all these intersections, when you base it off the MUTCD, a lot of the volumes are pretty low. We don't, Montana Ridge is pretty good. Nielsen's got a pretty good count. They're over 1,000 cars a day. But when you look at the MUTCD, it looks at 2,000 cars or more. So kind of jump into Nielsen, which is the last intersection that we have. Nielsen and Leanne is another one that we looked at. It actually has, surprisingly, the geometry of that road, Nielsen, is almost a 40-mile-an-hour design, and the reason is because the sight distances are so big. You could see for over 400 feet in either direction pretty easily. Actually, you can probably see closer to 600 feet. And so when we look at the sight distance, we're looking at 280 feet for your typical 25-mile-an-hour type of road, 300 feet for a 30-mile-an-hour road, etc. So because of the geometry of Nielsen, some can travel that road comfortably at 35, and so you're probably seeing a lot of people driving 35, which is what we do see. And there's no doubt, make no mistake, we do see speeding. We're seeing 35, 33, 38 miles an hour. But the question with this study was whether or not a traffic four-way stop, for example, was going to help in that situation. And so, take a step back, though. With Hillsborough, there was one accident reported in 2014, and it was a failure to stop at the intersection at Hillsborough. It was during the nighttime. I don't have the specifics, but it was during the evening. There is a street light there, and so it was during the evening. It was a illuminated intersection, and so we did have one accident on Hillsborough. But it's still, when you look at the MUTCD, it talks about 5 crashes or more, and so when you look at whether or not it meets the criteria, it didn't meet that criteria. So, but going back to Nielsen and Leanne, same thing. We looked at the sight distance, the traffic volumes coming in and out of the intersection, as well as the speed, and all those particular situations. It did not meet the criteria to change the current stop configuration of the stops on Leanne and the through street on Nielsen. So I know it's a lot of information, kind of threw it out there real quick. The specific numbers for each one of these is on your following sheets of the memo. Any questions?
I do have one. I know, I think it was roughly the May timeframe when this came up previously. And as I recall, the discussion at that point was that it could possibly add liability on the city by adding stop signs in areas where they're not recommended.
Well, I mean, that's, in my opinion, it could. I mean, it's probably more of a legal question to ask. When you do divert from recommended design practice, I mean, I think that kind of always leaves you open to, if somebody did have an accident there, say you put a stop sign there, somebody had an accident, and if somebody was savvy enough to kind of look at all this information, then some can argue that, well, it didn't require a stop sign to be there, it didn't meet the warrants for it, so, but again, I'm probably not the best one to answer what specific legalities may be there. I mean, I think it's safe to say that we have, you know, we're liable for every intersection, so just as sidewalks as well, but.
Questions for Rick?
I just wanna go see it all.
Yeah, I'd like to have seen this before the meeting, so it's reviewed it beforehand rather than having you highlight it for us. And I understand that, you know, while these guidelines don't recommend a stop sign there, this body can still put one there. There is a certain amount of liability with any sign we put up anywhere. And with the issues, we've had a history of one small child that got hit on Montana Ridge, and there was a cry for some stuff there. So it comes down to a safety issue. You're saying that the tracking did show people were driving at a higher speed down through there. They forget the fact that they're traveling so far and don't pay attention to their speed. So I think there's a safety issue that requires some method of doing it. And we had some patrol officers in the area, and there were comments of people appreciate the fact that they were making an effort to try and curtail those that were not abiding by that speed limit. But for the safety issue, I think the stop sign, at least one of those two intersections on Montana Ridge, is warranted. And on Nelson, there was a stop sign there at one point when the subdivision was made. A lady that lives on the corner there commented that since that sign was removed, it made a big difference in how fast people drive down the street because they have no reason to slow down halfway down that long running street. So she was quite concerned that wasn't there. On the other side, we have a budgetary concern in that we're going out and putting 4 signs out and a speed hump in these locations when complaints become regular. And we have liability for that, somebody damaged their vehicle or whatever. So there, you know, we can't get away from the liability. And we're paying to put that out, and we're paying to take it back up. And we could place 4 signs at 2 different intersections here and alleviate that expense at a fourth of the cost. And I think it is something that I would like to see done for the safety and for the budgetary concerns that we have here.
Is that something that has to start with transportation committee, or what's that in that process?
Well, I mean, we've spent a tremendous amount of time just in this reporting right now.
Yeah, I would say that at this point, it kind of really just depends. I mean, the
It would
day's
need
not.
to go, that would be just board decide.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you know, I mean, it's really up to whether the board wants to do that or not. I mean, I wasn't here.
Of this presentation, though, Alderman Arnold, it wasn't to put you guys on the spot. It was just Rick's presentation, and you guys now have the report. You can take a look at it, ask, you know, any questions, and it doesn't have to be, you know, during this meeting, too.
Okay. As long as I can go look it all before I vote.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no additional previous business or new business, move on to presentations. First one, we have a presentation of Chief Scarborough from Sny Valley Fire Protection District.
Mayor, members of the board, just wanted to take a chance to introduce you to Chief Scarborough. He started down at Sny Valley as the chief, about 6?
October of last year.
Okay, it's been almost a year now. We try to, a little bit off. We try to get together on occasion and visit, and with Sny Valley being on the east side of Grain Valley and actually part of our, within our growth area, I thought this would be a good chance to have him come, just to introduce himself to the board. Don't have a formal presentation, but just want to connect the name with the face and a little information about himself to you guys.
I appreciate you guys giving me just a couple of minutes here. And I don't have a PowerPoint or any big presentation, and I can see the disappointment on your faces. I apologize. Just really briefly, I have been with Sny Valley Fire since October 1 of last year. Prior to that, I spent almost 24 years with Central Jackson County Fire District, which is your district for your current footprint, most of your current footprint. And the city of Blue Springs and some of unincorporated Jackson County. Sny Valley is the district that lies directly to your east. We stretch 78 square miles all the way out into Lafayette County, covers portions of Bay City and unincorporated areas of Lafayette County. But within your growth areas, as you continue to push east, you will actually move out of the Central Jackson County Fire Protection District and into Sny Valley. So with that in mind, Ryan and I have been trying to stay in touch with things. We're very interested in doing what we can do to help promote economic development and growth along the corridor here and the cities that we protect and the cities that we'll protect in the future. So at any point, if any of you have any questions or want to talk to me, want me to come before the board and provide any information on what we do, I'm happy to do it. And that's really all I have for you tonight, just to say hello and introduce myself.
Did you bring your cards?
I do have cards in there.
Thank you.
That's right.
Ask Tom, I'm one of those people. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for Chief then? All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Take care. Okay, next on the presentations, we have Fire Engine Design, Johnson Boyer.
Thank you for having me.
Just probably a little background before we get here, since he came right after Chief Scarborough. He does not design fire engines.
Okay.
This is actually
I was going to say, we don't buy fire engines.
This is the firm that the school district has engaged for their marketing and rebranding. And as we had the discussion, I think probably about a month ago in one of our board meetings, Alderman Coleman had asked if the board would like to hear what they have to say about the rebranding that they've done for the school district and give Jonathan a chance to at least visit with the group. So that's why he's here this evening.
Yes, thank you for having me. And thank you for actually pronouncing my name correctly. That is hardly ever happens. With Jonathan Boyer from Fire Engine Design. As he said, we're a division of actually a larger marketing and advertising firm in Kansas City called Bernstein Rang. But we're a smaller division based in the Crossroads, and we were designed to work on projects of the scale like this. And so, like I said, the last project we did in this area, and that's how we came to know you guys, was we did a rebranding for the Grain Valley School District and came up with a new identity system and a solution to mainly help that school system project to consumers, whoever their customer is, what they were about and what they wanted to be about going forward. And so what I'll take just a minute about is just to, when we talk about a brand identity, I think a lot of people think, somebody's going to give us a new logo. Well, I would tell you anybody can give you a new logo for probably free. But what we're offering, the solution that we would bring is to work with you guys, probably this board, and you probably have some other stakeholders, for you to identify to us what message and how do you want to portray the city of Grain Valley going forward. Not necessarily what it is today, although it could be today. A branding identity exercise would probably be, what's the story we want to tell for the next 5 to 7 years? And once we get that core information from you, we kind of boil that down to how do you get that on a written word, and that's understanding your strategies and where you're going. And then, after we've gathered a lot of information, we take our creative team, looks at the words and looks at the strategy, and then they develop the brand identity aspects that we would use to identify. And it would include logo, but it would include colors. It would include how the logos or the look would be on a variety of all your assets, whether it be your city trucks, your business cards, at some point your signage. Now, obviously, you can't replace it, well, you can, but it costs a lot of money to replace everything at once. What you do is identify a toolbox, and then as you go forward and replace tools, you have a new kind of core set of identity that you use. And I think Jeff brought up the primary reason that we would recommend that kind of brand identity based on your input is really to how do you project the progressive nature and how do you attract more business and economic activity to Grain Valley. And so that's what I think would be the major benefit of doing a brand identity system. And the way it would work, it'd probably take us about 2 or 3 months because gathering the information from you takes a while, and then we have to do some creative exercise. We bring it back to whoever is kind of tasked with kind of approving that, and then we deliver the assets, and then from there, we could do more projects to help you apply that in different ways. But the basics would be just and I've got some examples that I can leave you with, guys, that kind of show what we did for the school district. And they've been very happy with the work we did. As a matter of fact, they've come back to us and said, boy, we love what you created for us so much. Now we'd actually like you to help us apply that to certain tools and tactics, which is the stage that we're in with the school district. Like I said, I could certainly answer a lot more questions. I know you guys have a full agenda, so I don't want to go too far about what we would propose, but I'd like to hear from you. What questions do you have or feedback?
Well, I'm going to ask a question because I just heard something you just said that was interesting that I hadn't heard you say before. You mentioned for the next 5 to 7 years. Tell me more about why 5 to 7 years.
Well, I say that number, and actually it could be longer term to think through. I get people out of don't think about a brand identity solution as, hey, we've got this task we want to accomplish this year or in 2018, because that's thinking too small, too short term. I'd say 5 to 7 years, and for a city, actually, it could probably be a much longer term to think through, because you've got to think, what do you want to attract to the city probably in the next decade or so. Any new look we do, any kind of a brand identity, though, probably at some point does need a refresh. So typically, a brand identity would last, I say that from a 5 to 7 year, more, and that's more from a consumer retail brand. Actually, a city brand would probably last much longer than 5 to 7 years, because you generally don't change your look that often. So I probably underestimated that. But I would, the key takeaway I would see is when you start a project like this, think in the future. Don't think about the immediate this year or next year.
How long does the process take?
I'd say generally about 8 to 10 weeks from start to finish. It could probably be done a little bit quicker than that, but generally what slows, I mean, actually the actual work takes less time than that, but actually coordinating times, if we, hear from you, the hardest, one of the longest pieces to take is to get the stakeholder involvement up front, and you have to determine from us who is all the stakeholders that you need to get that feedback from. Is it this board? Is it members of the community? It could be, but I will tell you sometimes with any kind of design project, sometimes more voices is worse than less, because you could show something to 5 people and get 5 opinions. So we like to get feedback up front about what's the strategy and objective, and then have a smaller group that's actually approving the grade. But I would say generally it's probably an 8 to 10 week process.
What's the average cost for your product?
Looking at, for this project specifically, I'm in the range of about $7,500 is what I have in the current proposal. And that would include all the assets, and I can show you more examples of what the pieces would be. And that's actually the same price that we did for Grain Valley School District. Branding projects can be all over the board. I mean, some could be a lot more. It's hard for a firm like us to do it for any less, because of the time and energy and the skill set that we put into it.
Do you us samples of what we can look over?
I do. I've got some proposals. I brought 4 copies, which I can leave with you guys. I can also email the PDF version of that to you, and you can distribute it to however you want. And in that proposal, it's kind of a self-contained, actually, I have it here. It goes through about our company, our staffing, our philosophy, our branding. It outlines the specific projects that we would do for the city of Green Valley, and in the back it has some case studies and some different examples that we've done. So I think it's really kind of a real self-contained story of the whole project. Like I said, I can leave the 4 copies here today, and can certainly email a PDF of the others.
Obviously it's a much bigger picture, but what's the deliverable at the end of the project? What do we end up with?
Generally, it's a lot of digital files in various formats that you would need for various uses. So we give you files that could be 1 color, could be 4 color, things that could be used on a website versus things that could be used in email versus a file that's formatted to be printed. So that's kind of the basic core deliverable. But the overarching deliverable, part of that is more of a guideline, maybe 2 pages, that really talks about how to use the brand asset and how not to use the brand asset. And there's also kind of during the process is more that development of really what's the elevator speech for the city of Green Valley, because that's what we use to drive the creative. So part of that is kind of understanding if you were just saying, you know, the short 2-minute version or actually the 20-second version to someone, what would you want to say? We kind of help you boil that down to a sentence or a paragraph, which then leads to the creative. And those files come up, we'll give you that printed, but generally it's digital files today, is how they're delivered, that you guys could use for, in theory, you could give that to any designer working on any future project, and they could look at that toolbox and be able to execute. So you wouldn't necessarily have to come back to us to do a project a year down the road. The tools, we would give you the tools in the toolbox that any designer could use.
Thank you.
That's one of the books since I don't do computers.
Anymore.
I will give you one, and I'll let you decide how you want to distribute it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions?
Really what this gets down to is just branding and identity and some of those elements that we've discussed in the recent past, just as far as economic development and growth and all those kinds of things, right?
I will leave one other document with you guys, and it's kind of the midpoint branding piece that we did for the school system, and it's more than just the deliverables, but it kind of goes through our thought process of what we learned about the community, and that came, and a lot of what we learned about the school system will apply to what you as a community are saying. And there's going to be some similarities and some differences. I would hope there's some overlap, but there will be some differences. But this takes you kind of through the thought process of how we executed that brand identity for the school system. Again, I can also send you this as a PDF.
Thank you.
I wasn't exactly sure how many people present to, so I didn't bring copies for everyone.
I'm the only one.
No, that's okay.
Has your company ever done a municipality before?
Has done what?
A city before? Matt, see like UMKC, it looks like in here.
A lot of I'm not familiar in my tenure there if we've ever done a municipality, but I'm quite certain that somebody in the firm has done 1 or 2. But I can't tell you today that yes, we did it for this city. I could certainly get back and see. But the examples we put in there were kind of closely try to align to what we thought that your needs would be. And there's certainly more on our website as well to show current work that we do for other brands.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for me.
Okay, see no other presentations, move on to public hearings. First public hearing is petition for Community Improvement District, northwest corner of I-70 in Butner-Tarzany.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, tonight we will be holding the public hearing for the CID, as you just said, and we have Ms. Jennifer Beard from Lauber Municipal to give the presentation. So I'll turn it over to her from here. I was just making sure that that was coming on.
Kids go.
Thank you, Brian. As Brian said, just because this is a public hearing for the record, my name is Jennifer Baird. I'm an attorney in law firm, municipal law. Our address is 250 North Institute Road in East Missouri. And, like Brian said, the reason I'm here is by statute, whenever a petition to form a community improvement district is filed with the city, it requires that a public hearing be held within a certain amount of time. And so what I want to do is just go over some of the petition requirements with you and then talk about next steps. Most of you guys know, probably all of you are very, very familiar with the location of this community improvement district, but for those that in the audience that may not be, this is located at the northwest corner of I-70 and Buckner-Tarzany Road. It consists of about 4 different parcels. To the east, you've got the Casey's General Store. You also have the American Best Inn, as well as the B&B Theater, and most recently, the construction of the Price Chopper store. And then on the west side, you have a Comfort Inn, and then there's an auto and diesel repair shop. These lots are currently vacant. This area is also located within an existing TIF area. It's actually redevelopment project area 3. The entire CID is located within that project area 3. As you can see, project area 3 actually is a lot bigger than the proposed CID area. And so, just want to go over a little bit of the petition requirements, and I'll go back to the reason it's significant that it's in a TIF area. But to begin with, the petition was actually filed somewhere around August 1st. There is one property owner, which is SMAS Developers, Investors. The name of the proposed district is the Village of Green Valley Community Improvement District. Under the statute, it's required to be signed by more than 50% per capita and by assessed value. In this case, the math is easy because there's only one property owner, and they filed the petition. The district itself is being formed as a political subdivision, and what that means is it will be governed by a board of directors. Under the statute, that board of directors can range anywhere from 5 to 30 members. I've never seen a CID with 30 members, so I can't even imagine trying to get 30 people to a meeting. But this one is proposing 5 board members. Of the 5 members, 1 would be a city-appointed member. The other 4 are named, or all of them are actually named in the petition, but any subsequent or any, once their terms expire or if there's vacancies, then the district will submit a slate to the mayor. The mayor will then appoint those members with the consent of the board. The funding mechanism in this case is a sales tax. Under the statute, it could be different types of funding mechanisms for community improvement districts. Could be sales tax, it could be an assessment, or even a property tax. In this case, it's strictly the funding mechanism would be a sales tax. The term of the existence is 20 years. And they are asking for a blight determination. If you recall, because this is in an existing TIF area, there was a blight determination made in 2010. And so they're still relying on that blight determination, as even though there's been some intersection improvements, the property still has not developed. It's a difficult site to develop. The 5-year plan, it's a requirement of the CID statute, and that they submit this 5-year plan. The 5-year plan must include basically the reasons for the district, like what types of services will they offer, what kind of improvements will it offer, and so I go in a little bit more detail on the next slide. Here's information from the petition. As you can see, most of the CID improvements are primarily in order to get the site ready for development. So So there's a lot of grading, sanitary sewer, water lines. These are all costs that can be reimbursed under the CID statute. The CID statute, those revenues, there can be, there's a wide range of improvements that can be done under a CID. In addition, if you'll note that very last line, it says legal formation costs. That's included in that total project or estimated cost of about $2.4 million. I wanted to bring that to your attention because on the next slide, I break down a little bit more of the cost. I take out that $50,000 and I put it under its own heading as a startup cost. So that's why there's a difference. If you're looking at this slide compared to the previous slide, that's the difference in the estimated cost of eligible improvements. On this slide, I just took out that $50,000, if that makes sense. There are some other costs associated with the districts. For example, as a political subdivision, they're going to have at least an annual meeting. They'll have to adopt a budget. They'll have to do certain requirements that a lot of cities are required to do. So there's all types of costs that the district will incur. So it's estimated that cost is going to be about $10,000 per year. And then also district services, when we talk about maintenance of maybe parking areas or landscaping areas, those types of costs would fall into this maintenance. What we don't see on the slide and what's not required to be included in the petition, although we do ask the developer to include that information, is what would be the estimated revenue. And they're estimating a revenue of $100,000 per year. And that is based really on the idea that this district would retain that full 1 cent. I say that because previously we talked about how this is located within a TIF district. So currently, Project Area 3 is not activated, so it's not collecting any pilots or EATs, okay? And so once we activate that area, then the development will start producing both pilots and EATs. And if you recall, the pilots are that increment between the base of what the property tax is being generated right now and what it will be at development. That's the increment. 100% of that gets collected under the TIF. In addition, the TIF also collects EATs, or economic activity taxes. And so by statute, 50% of that is collected. And so right now, the property is not generating any economic activity tax. So any additional economic activity tax that's being generated or that will be generated, half of that is collected by the TIF. Well, the TIF statute goes on to say that with the CID, 50% of that automatically gets captured under the TIF. And what the developer is requesting is that 1%, that 50% of the CID, what they're requesting is that they be able to keep that full 1 cent so they can go back towards these improvements. With regards to that, we have, when we reviewed it, their proposal, we actually asked Springstead Incorporated to do an analysis for us because we weren't exactly sure could the TIF, we always encourage developers to not only, if we're giving them a TIF incentive, but we also encourage them to impose these CIDs to help pay down the TIF faster. So we asked Springstead to do an analysis with regards to could the city still make its payment on the bonds that were used for the interchange improvements that are attributable to just that Project Area 3. We asked them to do that analysis for us. And so they came back and they basically said that they believed that the city, through getting the pilots and EATs off this project and not the CID sales tax, but they believe that it could actually, they could still generate enough revenue to pay that debt service on those bonds. So my understanding is that the redevelopment Project Area 3, their portion of the debt service is about $150,000 a year. And so through Springstead's analysis, they projected that even what they did was they kind of backed into the answer saying, okay, what is the lowest amount of taxable sales per square foot that could occur and still be able to pay off the bonds? And so they had generated, or through their analysis, they guesstimated about $100 per taxable square foot for retail and about $147 for restaurants. And when looking at that number compared to what we did in Project Area 2, those numbers in Project Area 2 were much higher, like in the $250 to $350 range. So Springstead was being very conservative with its numbers, but in the end, they believed that we could actually, that the city could approve this petition with the idea of not having to collect the full 1 cent, or collect any of the CID sales tax, excuse me. So, so that's the petition that's before you. Moving forward, what we would do is if on the agenda tonight is an ordinance to approve the petition as it's been submitted, if the board approves that, then what we would do is bring back a cooperative agreement. And that cooperative agreement would basically set forth what are the city's responsibilities, what are the CID's responsibilities, but it also make it clear that the CID would remit any of that CID sales tax that's automatically collected from the TIF and remit it back to the developer for this project. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So what are you foreseeing going in over there? Restaurants?
That was what was originally projected was restaurants and retail. I know that the developer's here. I don't know if they'll be able to mention exactly or...
We'll be happy to speak to it, but there won't be a lot of specifics.
Okay. Would you like for them to speak to that question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, Spencer Thompson with the Thompson Walker Law Firm, 4700 Bellevue, Suite 404, Kansas City, Missouri, 64112, representing the developer, applicant, landowner, SMAS investors. Commissioner or Alderman Todd, to answer your question specifically, we're in discussions right now with a number of potential users for the site. They tend to mostly be restaurant users, but not exclusively. We're looking at options for possibly a multi-tenant strip retail type use that could attract, a variety of retail type uses, things that you would expect to see in any community your size that you maybe don't have now, or maybe you have.
Chains.
It just depends. It just depends. We very much would like to bring some of the types of restaurants, let's say, for example, that you see down the road in Blue Springs or in Lee Summit or in Independence that you don't have here. Certainly would like to do that so that you can capture some of that casual dining and customers that are going outside your community now because there aren't, I guess, a lot of those. It's really a highway site. Obviously, it's got great visibility. It's really just going to depend on who ultimately is willing to, invest in and develop in that location. Obviously, it helps with what you've done with your broader, interchange there, and with the TIF that you've approved that's allowed for development to occur on the northeast quadrant, Price Chopper, et cetera. In a way, we're somewhat competitive. We're very friendly with the folks who are developing that. We know them well, known them for years. We don't see it as a lot of direct competition. There's options that we have that they wouldn't have. There's options that they'll have that we won't. And so I want to be clear on that. We're not looking to steal somebody else's users. These users, quite frankly, dictate where they go. We don't dictate to them. If they want to be in that interchange, and they want, some want to be on what they call the going home side. Some want to be on the coming home side because, if they're a Starbucks, as an example, they want the going to work side because that's where people stop and get coffee. If they're, a sit-down restaurant, they prefer to be on the coming home side because that's where people stop and eat dinner. So it's really, we've been in this business a long time. The folks who own it, myself as an attorney for it, I've represented developers for 25 years. and done a lot of retail development, the tenants dictate where they go. We can prepare a site for them, you know, we can build the field of the dream of, you know, the field of dreams and hope they come, but at the end of the day, they have their parameters and they're gonna come where they wanna come to. But definitely restaurant is a focus, and it could include, we hope it'll include sit down, it may include some fast food. It just will depend on what the market will support.
Alderman.
I do, question, not sure to whom it would be best directed. Sure. Who makes the blight determination? Well, that was already actually made by this board back in 2010, when you passed the TIF, and so we're simply relying on the existing blight determination, as Ms. Barrett said, and there's been no development of the property, there's been no real improvements to the property. All you've seen over the past number of years is the removal of the gas station that was there, the removal of the tanks and the cleanup of the underground storage tanks and all that. That's obviously an improvement, but that didn't, you know, address everything. And so we're relying on that prior blight finding that this body made. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
I don't know if it comes out here or not, but, you know, the citizenry would be the ones paying the 1 cent sales tax to pay for this. If that didn't meet its goal to cover this $2 million investment.
The developer just has to use it. The city isn't on risk for any of the sums. This is not a general tax or there's no obligation from the city. The nature of these CIDs is such that you create them, you give them the authority to tax up to 1% on sales occurring only within the CID district. If, for example, a citizen has an objection to paying that tax, then they can choose not to shop in that district, and then they wouldn't pay the tax. But further to your question, if there isn't enough money to support the reimbursements that are being requested, then the developer simply gets what's produced, and at the end of the 20 years, if it's not enough, it's not enough. And as you can actually see from the estimates, it probably won't be enough. We've asked for $2.3 million based upon estimated costs that we think will incur. Obviously, we'll do everything that's in our best interest to keep the cost to a minimum, because the developer will pay those costs up front out of pocket and only seek to get reimbursement once their business is operating, producing sales that are charged to 1%. If that 1%, as we've estimated, at full build-out averages $100,000 a year, well, you can do the math over 20 years. Even if you had it from day one, that's only $2 million. And we've asked to get 2.3. That wouldn't include any interest, Carrie. So the truth is, we can stand up here tonight and talk about a $2.3 million request under this CID. It's probably not in reality a 2.3 unless inflation and increased sales would drive that up. So does that answer your question? Yeah. So it's the developer who's at risk if there's a shortfall. And Jennifer, you can obviously confirm that, but I haven't said anything inaccurate.
Any more questions from the board?
Okay. I'm just a little concerned giving up the half cent of the TIF money.
Well, if I could speak to that, because that's obviously, just sitting back and listening to the presentation, if I were in your shoes, I'd be like, well, wait a minute, what's that all about? And I think the best way to look at that is simple. Right now, nothing is going on this property. There's not only no retail sales activity, no economic activity taxes of any kind being produced, but the property is at a very low assessment relative to what it would be if it were developed. And so there's no increment being produced for your TIF. It hasn't even been activated. This whole project area 3 in the northwest quadrant is completely dormant. And there's a reason for that. It's dormant and hasn't been activated because there's no activity. There's been no development generated. There's been no interest from third parties or outsiders to invest in that quadrant. And so I think what you have to look at is, look, if we do this, it will spur development of at least a portion of Project Area 3. What we're asking is simply to keep the full amount of that 1% for our part of Project Area 3. So the rest of Project Area 3 would be unaffected, okay? And by doing that, you will actually increase
exponentially the likelihood of development of something within Project Area 3 that will produce both a pilot, a real estate payment in lieu of tax, which we will not collect any of at the CID, and every other economic activity tax, including your normal city sales tax. So you're really not giving anything up because you're not currently charging the 1% CID tax. You get to keep, the TIF keeps everything else that would be generated. We're simply asking to have a CID treated like a CID that's not within the TIF, essentially. And that's going to allow your TIF to produce more increments. So when you think about it, you don't have any income off of Project 3 or this ground to pay debt service now. But by doing this and allowing its development, incenting its development, truly incenting it, you're going to have increment. And I would point out that none of that TIF increment goes to the owner. That's all designed, and Ryan can confirm this, that's all going to already incurred costs and expenditures that the city is obligated on for road improvements and other areas in that intersection.
We've been discussing this project for over 2 years now. And the first time that we all sat down and talked about it, one of the first questions was, okay, we need to do a TIF amendment. How much more funding can we get from TIF? And the answer was, there's nothing there. We can't go back to the well. We kind of set the standard with the first project that we did. Outside of that, we're just funding road improvements with the surrounding project areas because we're not going to assume any additional risk. And we went back and forth on the numbers trying to figure out a way to how can we make this work, how can we get a project up in that area with no additional TIF funding. And really the only way that the project worked was if we gave that recapture back to the developer. It puts from my perspective, it's a win-win for us because it puts all of the risk and all of the incentive on the developer to do what they're supposed to do. The quicker they get vertical construction and doors open, the quicker they are able to recoup some of those costs for the public improvements. We're not going back for any additional TIF ask or having to do a TIF amendment. It really puts the onus on the developer, and it motivates them.
And as Ryan basically said and can confirm, when we first sat down, we had an expectation of being able to receive some of that TIF because, quite frankly, the CID is an imperfect solution for the site. It doesn't generate enough revenue, as we talked about earlier, to cover, let alone the current costs that we're talking about, but it doesn't have enough to cover a carry cost, a cost of capital or an interest or a return on it. So when we first sat down with the city to talk about the acquisition of the property, which, by the way, we had to assemble this over a period of time from multiple owners to create a developable, a marketable site. When we first sat down, we were operating on the mistaken assumption that the already approved TIF, Project Area 3, that some monies that it would produce, some of the increment, could in fact be redirected into this project, and we were flatly told that that's not possible, that's already being used, or that's already been committed. There's no money, but it's been committed once it exists to help retire already existing debt. So again, it's a win-win because without this being developed, you don't have any increment. So you're getting the lion's share of, well, you're getting all of the TIF increment. All you wouldn't be getting is the 1%, if that makes sense.
And that was a very awkward conversation.
When you told us we couldn't, yeah.
Well,
Imagine the conversation I had with my clients afterwards when they're like, did they just tell us that we're in a TIF area but we get none of the benefit? And I said, yeah, that's exactly what they just told us. You're getting nothing from the TIF.
And really,
Pardon?
New road.
No, I agree. But they're already there. They're not. It's not going on site, I guess, is the argument. Not to belittle the road improvements. We appreciate that. Those are valuable.
And really, it benefits the city in my mind too, because we've seen this in other areas. It's really pushing you guys to go retail with the site as opposed to non-retail, which doesn't generate the sales tax.
Excellent point, and it's one we hadn't made previously. But without the 1%, it definitely makes sense. You know, but not for retail, not for what we're talking about. Economically, cost-wise, it's just too difficult. I mean, you can see what we've already incurred to assemble it, and, you know, the site work, the road improvements, the utility work, there's a lot there that just economically wouldn't make a lot of sense, and it only starts to make sense when you know you've got that 1% that you could receive in the future, so.
I have a question, and like Mr. Bannon, I'm not sure who to address it to, but based on the project area 3, it's obviously much larger than
our property.
The CID
correct
border. How does that work, or once we do a CID for this, what if another developer comes in and has acquired all that other property outside of your area? Does that restrict us from a second CID in that area? So we could, as long as those property owners agree to that, they get taxed.
Yeah, you could, in theory, create 100 CIDs within property. Yeah. Yeah. It would have no impact on the remaining portions of Project 3 or any of your existing TIF. It's just this property.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
And one point I would like to make with the board about the assumptions, you heard Jennifer say that when we went through and did the analysis to try and project the repayment of the debt through the TIF, she mentioned that we used low baseline projections, and just in an effort to be conservative, we used $100 per square foot for retail and $147 for restaurant in project area number 3. Project area number 2, the assumptions that we went with, which were good market assumptions, were $250 for retail and $250 to $300 for restaurant. So you can see the contrast right there is $150 per square foot lower. Again, just in an effort to be conservative, to make sure that we weren't overcommitting on what the repayment of the TIF would be before we committed that.
Right. And to be clear, what your city administrator is referring to is the analysis the city and their financial consultant did in allocating some portion of your already existing debt service. This is why. It's not the same analysis we go through in doing our projections for the CID, just to be clear. So I don't want you to think that we've way underestimated the CID revenue. Our CID revenue projections are based on more market assumptions for sales. Does that make sense? So they basically did a really conservative approach to say, look, this is a win for the debt service we already have. And
how many businesses are we talking about in your little area?
It really just depends, Alderman Totten. It's just we've laid it out. It's only about 5.5 acres in total, so it's not a huge site. With parking requirements as they are today for users, that drives a lot of it. It's going to depend. I'll be candid. One thing that's going to dictate it to some degree is there's an existing billboard on the site, large highway billboard, that we don't own and don't control. And we're having to design around that, or hopefully work some sort of economic solution to that allows us to get rid of it. That you'll see is actually in our application. There's a line item for possibly having to pay to remove that, because it has a huge impact on the developability and how you configure the site, as you might imagine, because it's kind of right almost square in the middle, which is unfortunate. But these are the challenges that sites like this have. You got access challenges that have occurred in the past that you've solved largely, but we still need a right-in, right-out on the BB, which we've got MoDOT to approve contingently. It's not final formal, but they've said we would do that. You've got topography issues. You've got the whole assembly of the site that we've gone through to date. You've got this billboard. You've got detention. There's a lot of stuff there. And even though you all have done a fantastic job of laying the table, you've got the table, but it's not fully set for this site. And what we're asking you to do is kind of finish the place settings for the table so we can sit down and all eat together, hopefully someday.
What kind of time frame are you looking at?
20, 30 years. For the actual development, I mean, our goal is to get that done as quickly as possible because folks already own the ground. There's already costs that have been incurred. Every incentive for us is to do it as quickly as we can. What's realistic, I would say full build out, 2 to 3 year period maybe.
Yeah.
Because it takes that long to get anything. I mean, we don't have a user committed to the site yet. We've got several that we're in discussions with, but as you can imagine, the users aren't real quick to sign on the dotted line, even to a non-binding LOI, if we haven't got all our ducks in a row and know we're going forward in for example, that this process of getting the CID approved, I mean, that's a contingency of us to be able to perform for them. So until we have that done, we're right now engaging in discussions with professional commercial brokers trying to determine just exactly which one we want to hire. Unfortunately, the city isn't full of wonderful commercial real estate brokers. I shouldn't say that in a public meeting, but we got that challenge. Who's the best to market it? Who knows this market well? Who's got the best relationships? But even without a broker right now working on this, we've already got a number of conversations ongoing. So we're doing all we can. And we're motivated because we own the ground. They own.
If I have any questions, can I have one of the cards so I can call you up? I'm a pass.
Yeah.
Well, if you have questions, Alderman Totten, why don't you get them to me and I'll reach out to,
I prefer to go to the horse.
Spencer. Well, all right.
He's giving it to me. I'll let you know when I do it.
business card.
All right.
No, I used to run around for KFC to neighborhoods when they were opening up stores, and I have a gift of gab, ask anybody that knows me. And I helped open up Eastwood Traffic Ways KFC.
Well, let me make this point. It's a little off script, but if any of you have a friend, a family member that is in a retail or restaurant business that you think could look at the site, send them our way. If you have a particular user or type of user, you know a pizza place that you think would just kill it there, tell us, because we can't think of every user and every potential tenant or buyer for a portion of the site. And so any recommendations any of you have, any thoughts, if you've got family members that want to open a second location because they're here, or, relocate from Blue Springs if they want to, whatever it may, we're always open, our door's open for suggestions. Encourage you to help in that regard.
Any additional questions?
Thank you.
What would be the next steps to move this forward?
I sit down and you guys vote.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, it'll be a
close the
public hearing, so I'll have to
now.
open it up for public comment, and then we'll, after that, we'll vote on it down further, looks like. So, if no one else?
There was a timeline on one faction of this, and does that play into this activating part of this Section 3?
Yes.
And will it affect the rest of Section 3 as to what? Because I know there's a limitation of timeline that we can draw taxes after something started.
Yeah, we have to activate it by 2020, isn't it?
2020, correct. So.
Whether we develop or not.
Correct. So before that deadline hits, we would activate all of the remaining project areas that aren't activated now.
And are you asking if we'll do like we did down here, maybe a 3A and a 3B? Is that what you're trying to get to?
Well, I don't want to do anything with this portion of it that would negatively affect the portion further to the north.
Okay. And fortunately, in this case, we can activate everything because since we are the only one in the TIF that's receiving proceeds from the TIF, we're able to go ahead and activate the entire project at once. And then as new developers come in, they just become part of the sales tax equation. Is that accurate?
That's correct. But, obviously you wouldn't have the same time frame with regards to how many years you collect on those future uses that may come in to a place where the TIF is already activated.
Okay. And after this, I'll open it up for public hearing then. We ask anyone who wants to speak for or against the project, please come forward to the microphone and give your name and address for the record.
Rayfield Turner. I live at 304 Southwest Crestview Drive in Grain Valley, Missouri. And I didn't hear all of your conversation. I heard somewhat of your conversation. And I was very interested and concerned, being that I work for purchasing contracting for the government. And I'm very much concerned about money that we have coming in the future, projects and land that we are willing to give to developers to develop for us being asked to pay startup fees, us be asked to be paid 1% of taxpayers' money. These things interest me, and I would like to be a part of it if I could talk to anybody and just be a part of it, because I'm quite aware of it. I work with the government. I've spent a lot of the government's money, not carelessly, but wisely. I might have, sometime or another, maybe not spent it wisely in their eyesight, but I'm very much interested in Grain Valley because we have a lot of undeveloped property. And we have developers that wanted to come into Grain Valley and develop our undeveloped property at our expenses. I don't know if I'm really for that or not, because sometimes developers take advantage of us. Sometimes they make money off of us because they have us at their fingertips. They have us under control because they know what we don't know. They know who the big money makers are that are willing to develop in the area, so they reap more of the profit than we do. I'm interested in Grain Valley, keeping the profit in Grain Valley. And I would like to be, or at least have knowledge of what's going on. You know, where is Grain Valley, or who are we giving Grain Valley to? That interests me. And when we are asked to give startup money, that concerns me. That concerns me when we have to pay 1%. That concerns me when we are spending money. We got to allocate money. This money for the present, this money for the future. We got to know that we're going to have this money coming in. We might predict that we're going to have it in, but we're not always sure we're going to have it. So if we know our community, we know we have available for now, yeah, I would say do what we must do, but I say do it with caution. And I say that when people ask us to fund their projects with our money, and they're the developer, then they're asking quite a lot of us. I think they are. Because I think if you want to develop my property, why don't you spend more of your money? Why do we have to spend our money? You're the ones that want to develop our property for us. So I think these things need to be taken very seriously. And believe me, the next time there's an election, I'm going to run for one of these offices. Because I see I've been sitting doing nothing for too long. And I explained that to the chief. I haven't been doing my job as a citizen. And I'm going to start doing it. That's all I have to say.
Sir, can I ask you one question?
Yes.
Where do you grocery shop?
Huh?
Where do you go to the grocery store at?
Right around the corner at what used to be Patricia's Market. I shop in Grain Valley.
So do I. I
support
just
my
wanted to make
community.
sure you were putting...
I buy gas here. I support my community. I don't go to Blue Springs to buy gas for my car. I don't have to go to Blue Springs to buy my food because I have a community that is willing to provide me with these things. And if I don't patronize them, I got nobody but myself to blame.
That's what I was wanting to make sure you understood that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak for or against the CID?
I have a point of clarification. Are we...
Mike, you need to come up and give your address since it's a public hearing.
We have to do it all official, like.
That's more of a question than a comment. Mike Solicitor, 210 Cannon Street, Grain Valley. The TIF, we collect the sales tax for the TIF, right? We collect the sales tax for the CID, right?
Correct.
The only difference of section 2 and section 3 is they won't be collecting TIF sales tax. Oh, section 3.
No, SID sales tax, community improvement sales
You
tax.
will be collecting that, but you won't be collecting TIF.
No.
Right. So what's the total sales tax for somebody coming up buying a bunch of bananas? 10% now? Or 11%?
No, it'll be 8.6. That's with the 1%, yeah, 8.6.
That's without the 1%.
Without the 1%, it'll be 9.6 with the 1%.
So the only difference in section 2 and section 3 is there's no TIF money being collected for section 3.
So there is, but it all
Yeah.
comes to the city.
It's,
There is, but it all comes to the city to pay for the road improvements.
Okay, not necessarily the developer.
No, that's for the developer.
So the CID money for 3 will go to the developer to pay off his infrastructure.
yes, sir.
And I was concerned that you said your revenues were only gonna be $100,000.
That's an estimate for the CID.
$100,000 in taxes collected?
Correct.
Okay.
Meaning
You said
to be,
revenue, you didn't say taxes. That's like you're voting for $100,000 in revenue.
that'd be 10 million in sales.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak on the public hearing? All right, seeing none, I'll close that public hearing. Next up, then we have a public hearing for Grand Valley property tax levy.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, I'm gonna let, Kathy stand up, give you a brief presentation on our, recommended, tax levy for 2017 and 18.
Mayor, Board of Aldermen, the 2017 assessed valuation that we received from Jackson County is approximately $194 million for this year. That's an increase of about 6% over last year. We're proposing to leave the tax levy at the same rate of 1.7294 per $100 of assessed value. It's the same rate that it was last year. According to state calculations, we could set that at 2.0667. The difference is about 34 cents per $100 of assessed value. But we've been pretty thorough and fiscally diligent, so we kind of think we can operate with what we've got coming in now on the same rate. The revenue generated by the property tax supports 4 different funds. It generates revenue for the general fund, the park fund, the public health fund, and the biggest fund that it generates is for our debt service for our general obligation bonds. Every penny that you increase the levy, it increases the revenue about $19,000. So, any questions?
This would, by leaving the rate the same, it would cause people to pay slightly more, is that correct?
They still pay a little bit more because their values have gone up, but they won't pay as much as they could if we set them at the rates that the state would allow us to set them at.
Just out of curiosity, do you know approximately what the levy rate would be to stay revenue neutral?
Not off the top of my head.
It would drop about 10 cents
10
total.
cents.
Yes.
You know, and I don't know how that would
So it'd be
go against the different funds.
$1.62. The problem is that we're in a pretty steep growth trend. And so, I firmly feel that we should stay with the same levy rate just because, as we see these services, general fund, parks department, those things that we need to continue to have revenue growth along with the growth of those departments. But yeah, overall, you would see about a 10% levy decrease if you stayed growth neutral.
And you can't keep the revenue the same and provide services for more people.
Do you have any questions then?
Any questions? I don't see a lot of the growth that we're all talking about all the time. I hate to say this. Well, the increased housing that we're building, I'm not sure, we're like 60 building permits this year.
Gonna break over 100 new homes this year.
Yeah. But are they classified, they're not occupied at this time, we're talking about building.
Selling them as quick as they can.
Oh, yeah, there's
They're
a-
selling them
A
as
lot
quick-
of them are already sold when they're building them.
Builder has, someone's gotta pay the property tax.
Oh, I don't care about no.
Well, that's where it's at. That's the problem. Go up in Jeff's neighborhood and take a look at everything going on up there. I mean,
No,
that's,
I like where my own is. I
well,
got
this year, there's not a whole lot of, there's not room for houses there. That's why you're not seeing, you don't have a lot of empty
I'm
lots.
listening to people tell me they're moving out. Now, school board people don't get upset with me, but the cost of, activities and things for the school students and that, and they sold a home and they're moving.
They can go over to Kansas and spend about $400 in activity
Oh,
fees
I
for their
understand,
kids.
they went to Wyoming. But
So-
no, I'm just watching right now, and I know, like, on my block, I've got 4 properties sitting empty because it's all, God forbid, in probate, because mom died, and there's nothing that can be done until it's settled in court. That was 3 years ago.
Okay. Any other questions or corrections from the board? All right. See none, then, as this is a public hearing, anyone who wishes to speak in regards to the tax levy, please come forward to the microphone and podium. All right. Seeing no one, we'll move on to ordinances.
Bill number B 17-14, the second reading to become ordinance 2416, an ordinance establishing the zoning for certain land in Grand Valley as R1 single family for Logan Zusley and Larry Yamchick.
Mayor, I move that we accept Bill 17-14 for its second reading, making it ordinance number 2416.
Okay. I have a motion from Alderman Arnold to approve Bill B 17-14 for its second reading, making an ordinance 2416.
Yes.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Headley. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Alderman Bateman?
Yes.
Alderman West?
Yes.
Alderman Headley?
Yes.
Alderman Coleman?
Yes.
Alderman Totten?
Yes.
Alderman Arnold?
Yes.
6-0, Mayor. This is, first read of bill number B 17-15, an ordinance approving a petition to establish the Village of Grand Valley Community Improvement District.
Mayor, I move that we accept Bill B 17-15 for its first reading and bring it back by title only for its second reading.
I have a motion from Alderman West to approve Bill B 17-15 for its first reading, bring it back by title only for its second reading. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Headley. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, this is the first read of the ordinance that would approve the CID district that we just held the public hearing for.
Additional questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
6-0, first, Mayor. This is bill number B 17-16, an ordinance to establish the City of Grand Valley, Missouri's annual tax levies for the 2017 calendar year for general municipal government operations, the retirement of general obligation debt, park maintenance, and public health purposes.
Mayor, I move that we accept ordinance B 17-16 for its first reading and bring it back for its second reading by title only.
I have a motion from Alderman West to approve Bill B 17-16 for its first reading, bring it back by title only for its second reading. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Arnold. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, again, this is first read of the Grand Valley tax levy that we just held the public hearing for, and it will set the tax levy at the same rates as the previous year.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
6-0, first, Mayor. Bill number B 17-17, an ordinance annexing certain adjacent territory into the City of Grand Valley, Missouri for Justin Larkin.
Mayor, I move to accept Bill B-17-17 for its first reading and bring it back for its second reading by title only.
I have a motion from Alderman Arnold to approve Bill B-17-17 for its first reading, bring it back by title only for its second reading. Do I have a second? Second, Alderman West. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, this is an ordinance that will annex property just north of Greystone. If you will recall, there was a public hearing for this at the August 14th board meeting. This will be the first read. If we have any specific questions, Mr. Murphy can answer them.
With this annexation, could we put a stipulation that it was during the presentation, it was talked about it being single-family development? Could we put a stipulation with this annexation that the land be annexed with the intention to be family development?
So the original plan that was submitted was single family for everything in the back with possibility of commercial at the front. With the actual annexing part, the zoning isn't established at that time. That's a separate, kind of like what we just did with that previous ordinance. You have the public hearing for annexation, then you have 2 reads for the annexation. And after that, you have to establish the zoning. Because once land comes into a city, it really doesn't have a designation. I don't know that with the annexation part.
I don't think you can do it together. I think it needs to be done separately, under recommendations from the planning commission.
I mean, well, we can zone it. I mean, when it comes up for zoning,
I mean,
we can say, no, we don't want that zoning, or yes, we want that zoning.
So one thing I would say, that entire area that goes all the way up to Duncan, when we did the comprehensive plan, that area was actually shown as mixed, a number of different uses. It was a mixed use designation. The area is more than just this one that we're looking at here. But the original plan that, I mean, it's obviously preliminary, and Mr. Larkin is sitting back there, but it was R1, basically everywhere you see houses to the south, and then the front, they were leaving open the possibility of commercial.
It's my understanding that there was a piece of property on AA that was brought in with the stipulation it would be single family, and that was part of a planning and zoning meeting that I was at. The discussion was they were trying to change it to multifamily, and after the discussion.
Oh, you're talking about Winding Creek? At the very end of basically the edge of our city limits?
Right.
Yeah, the problem there was that it was billed as being single family, and after the first phase was going in, the developer came in to try to change the second phase of Winding Creek from single family to duplex.
So you tried to change the zoning.
Yeah. It was actually all zoned R1 to start with. That was after the fact he came in and asked PAZ to change that zoning. And we had people that spoke against it, and that obviously didn't go through.
Right.
But that wasn't, well, I don't know when that was for the annex, but I don't think that wasn't at one time, or done all at one time.
Now, I guess, but more of a legal question probably for Matt. Let's say, we annex it in, they come back with a zoning we may not, agree with. Do they have,
Who is they, sorry?
or whoever's
Oh, the
property owner, yeah, when they come up with their zoning. Doing the zoning we don't agree with, can they come back on us and say that we are hurting the value of the property because we won't agree to these? So I'll tell you, I've been threatened by the owner to the, south? That it's, because it's zoned, an existing zoning, but they're marketing it as something that's not zoned, and they've, basically threatened me that they would sue this board if we didn't change that zoning.
There's no zoning on the property right now, so the property owner can do what they want to, right now. And there's nothing that the adjacent property owners can do about it from a zoning standpoint, because it's not within the city.
Okay.
The city doesn't have any control over it until it's annexed within the city.
But when it's annexed, they come back to the zoning, and we don't like that zoning, it's still, can't come back on us, that we're hurting their value.
No.
Okay.
We have full statutory authority to set that zoning through planning and zoning and the Board of Aldermen.
All right.
But, yeah, I mean, as far as uses go on this, with it being a public hearing too, like I said, Mr. Larkin is in the back, and he is the owner of the property who's petitioning the board for annexation, so I would kind of point some of those questions towards him and what his vision is for that.
So there's no plans at this time to put multifamily on the, on the property?
Single family.
Just family and commercial at the time?
You guys have any questions? All right. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
6-0, first, Mayor. This is bill number B 17-18, chapter 635 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Grand Valley, Missouri pertaining to peddlers and solicitors regulations.
I move that we accept bill number B 1718 for its first reading and bring it back for its second reading by title only.
I have a motion from Alderman Totten to approve Bill B 17-18 for its first reading, bring it back by title only for its second reading. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Hammond. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, this amendment is actually in response to multiple complaints that we've had about over-aggressive peddlers and vendors within the city. In response to those concerns and complaints, Teresa and Chief Starbuck worked together to modify and bring this ordinance up to a more current status. I'm going to let Chief Starbuck kind of introduce the changes that we've had in that, and then also let him or Matt Gary talk about an additional section that we're going to be putting in here in between the first read or the second read.
The primary updates or clarifications have been added, be more specific on the prohibitions, personal peddlers from West has, and what specific things that we told you they are not to do, which are usually the complaints that we get from the citizens, and then also more clarification on the issuance and administration of identification card that will be required by all persons that are going door to door as a peddler or solicitor, and those are the primary changes.
Would you like to speak about the addition that we're going to have, or Matt?
Yeah, I can do that. So the addition that we proposed just provides a different procedure for if there's a denial of the permit in the first place, or if there's a revocation. It allows the chief to revoke a license or for specific reasons that are set forth, and then provides for a procedure to appeal that decision from the chief. That a person can make a written application to the clerk to appeal that, and then at the next board meeting, then that person gets a hearing to determine, and you guys ultimately have the authority to determine whether that specific license should be revoked or not. So it's similar to what goes on with like a liquor license or something like that, other businesses that are regulated.
And you guys will see an exhibit 635, peddlers and solicitors, titled revocation. The reason that this was not included in the original ordinance where the comments came from Mr. Cook, to my understanding, after we had already sent out the agenda and the ordinance had been reviewed. They pointed out the process that there was no, or he pointed out the fact that there was no process for appeal. So Teresa did some additional research, and I think Teresa and Matt both came up with this section. Now, it's up to the board. The board can approve this ordinance as a first read, and we will add this language in for the second read, so this will be included before the final adoption, or the board could table this ordinance, and we could add it in and bring it back for a first read at the next board meeting. Procedurally, it would be quicker to go ahead and approve a first read tonight, but obviously we want make sure everybody's comfortable with that, and if not, we can table it for the evening.
Okay.
Just one question on the revocation, by the chief of police. A lot of this happens on weekends when we may be gone, or may happen during time he could be gone on vacation. What do we do if he's not available to handle revocation and revoking of a permit?
I think it would just, when we can add or designate it
That's what I was
in
wondering.
his absence. I think whoever's the acting chief of police, if he's gone,
One of the captains.
would, I think by default, even without, we could certainly put it in here, but even without putting it in here, that's where that authority would.
It got to this point where we're talking about the revocation of the card, but it's got to the point where that renounced the ordinance under the general prohibitions of the any police officer the authority to arrest and cite them right then and there. And it would not likely, proper take the card, at that time. So the officers have an enforcement arm if that's what we consider.
I was just wondering on the outside availability of you to make that decision or come down to that. Way to handle
The
it.
other important changes is, for some reason, the original ordinance was written when we were issuing these, that they were good for 1 year. And we have, reduced that to 120 days, which is kind of an average between what they do in the summer and what they do in the spring. So that was more appropriate, to approve it in here.
Alright, any additional questions? Alright, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
6-0 first, Mayor.
Alright, next up, resolutions.
This is Resolution R-17-33, a resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Grand Valley, Missouri, reappointing Joe Hansa to the Board of Zoning Adjustment for a 5-year term.
Mayor, I move that we accept resolutions 17-33 for and as written.
I have a motion from Alderman Arnold to approve resolution R-17-33. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Totten. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
6-0, Mayor.
Alright, next up, city attorney's reports.
No report.
Next up, city administrator and staff reports.
We will start with, Mr. Murphy.
Mayor and Board, I just had one thing, just wanted to bring your attention that should be starting next week. Citizens will be receiving a city view in the mail, so that'll be for fall and winter. It's got a lot of good stuff in there. Got a lot of got the park guide in there, so a lot of good information for the citizens, and we should start to see that here pretty quick.
I see one of those in my mailbox here. You don't have my address, but I'll need one.
They deliver it here. We get some copies here ahead of time.
I never hear about it till it's all gone.
Mr. Davies.
Mayor and Board, I just wanted to provide you all with an update about our Veterans Tribute Butterfly Trail Park. In the audience here, we've got our Pathways of Honor President, Norm Combs, as well as our Secretary, Mike Schweitzer. Ground broke this past, Friday, Mike, that construction started on phase 1 of this project, and they've been working, every day since then. They were out there today still working on it. So we're in the process completing phase 1 of the project. I know these guys have worked tirelessly in raising funds for this effort. It's going to be a nice amenity to the park.
All right, Mr. Arroyo.
Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I just wanted to make you aware, as you may have noticed, some of our crews are out working on the curbs for this year's street maintenance contract. In the next week, we'll be starting work at the traffic circle there at Snodgrass. So if you see us taking out some of that vegetation, one of the problems that we have is obviously we want to keep traffic flowing in that area, four-way traffic. So
Chief Starbuck.
Mayor Gordon, I just wanted to introduce, if she would stand up, Catherine Reynolds, just started today. She is the newly hired victim advocate for the police department in the city of Green Valley. It's taken quite a while to get this position filled. That's one that requires very specific skill set and qualifications, and Catherine has those and went through a very rigorous background investigation. We're very pleased to have her. She'll be working full-time based here in the police department, and we are still looking, and we'll probably repost it for the second position of part-time victim advocate, and that individual will be assigned over to the police department. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have her card?
Sorry.
I need her card for when I get.
I'll have to budget that for next year.
Well, I had 7 homeless that I've been working on.
Really?
Yeah, so this is why.
The only thing that I have, Mr. Mayor, is that we have the Truman Heartland Dinner upcoming. The city has 2 tables for that this year. It's on October 14th. The only elected officials that I have confirmed so far are Bob Headley, Yolanda, and Mr. Mayor. And so I need to find out, I guess I was just going to kind of go down the row and see. Alderman Arnold, do you plan on attending that event?
I'd love to attend, but I'm already scheduled out of town that weekend.
Okay.
What's the date?
October 14th.
If I can hit you right, I'll go
The mayor will give you on.
Gee, he didn't even ask, did he?
I'll give you right, don't worry.
Well, I'm gonna rise all over the state.
Mr. Coleman?
I will not be there, unfortunately.
Okay. And then, let's see, Bob, Yolanda, Chris, will you be there? Mr. Beaman, sorry.
Sorry, schedule conflict, sorry.
Okay. All right, so with that confirmation, we're going to open it up to staff and some of the department heads. We already have some of the staff that Jim Cook specifically asked attend, and one of them is our court clerk, Carrie Boardman. And boy, Catherine, you've already gotten on Jim's good side because he insisted that you were at the dinner as well. So mark your calendar for October 14th. And then Kalila will be joining us along with the rest of the department head team. That's all that I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Next up is Board of Aldermen reports and comments. Alderman Arnold.
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Alderman Totten.
Not really too much at this time. I want to say thank you to all the people that have been surprising me to no end. And after Wednesday, I'm hoping to say thank you for the Mormon ministries that are coming through, because we're smashing cans. And they've been coming in to where you wouldn't believe it. So I'm saying thank you to all those that are working hard.
Okay. Alderman Coleman.
Yes. I have one of our constituents in Ward 3 who is actually here tonight, and Mr. O'Hara, we have been discussing some property that is becoming a nuisance for them. He lives in Creekside Village subdivision, who, what's the, Moreno?
Moreno.
It's a property that Mr. Moreno, our previous developer, has, that he still owns, and he's an absentee property owner, and that property, the grass continues to be a nuisance for them. So what I'm gonna ask is that the board consider mowing that property, twice a year for the residents there. Because there was some false hopes that were developed through the past developer, and unfortunately, that had gone to our park board, and the park board has decided that they did not want to pursue some of those opportunities. So I just think for our residents there, if we could try to help them by mowing for twice a year. And I think, Dale, if you don't mind, you wanna bring up, or was that you, what your thoughts were about that and how we might recoup some of that cost?
I don't know, I know there's a process for abating, high grass that the city goes through, which, if that process is followed, there is a billing process to recoup the cost of mowing that. Short of that, if we don't follow that process, we might be in violation of getting on private property and cutting that grass, which would be a bigger issue for us, I think, than anything else.
We actually, by law, we're allowed to go through that abatement process, which we have, but that only allows for 20 feet from the adjacent property owners. So my concern with mowing the rest of it is, to what end are we going to mow property adjacent that's not being taken care of? Fully support, and I don't know, Ken, if you can speak more to how often it's been abated or what I don't know how many times we have mowed it, but I know that it has been abated by the city and we have filed liens against the property.
Yeah, I think we have 2 liens currently and one that's getting ready to be filed from the last time that we did it. And that's just...
Oh, yeah, we're constantly reaching out to him.
He would love us just to take it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think he would love us just to take the lien and take the property, but, I mean...
Fortunately, at that point, it may be more cost effective for us to do it rather than us to wait.
But the issue that I think we run into or run afoul with, private property ownership, Matt, sorry, how are would we be able to go onto that property, and what sort of precedent does that set for any of the other properties?
I mean, we need to follow the abatement procedures that are in our ordinances as opposed to just going on the property and doing it. I mean, we would have to have the owner's permission if we're just going to go mow it. I don't know if it necessarily sets any precedent for the future. I mean, it certainly could. If there's other properties that are, are becoming nuisances within the city, this particular piece of property obviously is a larger issue than other places. But, I mean, if we're following the nuisance ordinance, we've got liens against the property. I mean, there's not really much else you can do. I mean, you can have the county do a tax sale on it, foreclose the lien, but then we end up with the property.
And
land bank ends up with the property.
Just to give everyone an idea of the scale, we're talking about 16 acres here. So what we've been mowing is a 20-foot perimeter around that. Any area that abuts a residential zoning, we have the abatement contract to mow a 20-foot buffer. If we start going back all the way into that property, that's going to be very time-consuming, and taxpayers are going to be paying to mow private property, basically, because we will not be able to recoup the abatement that occurs that's not part of our code.
So, but I think the main concern in defense of the residents there is the property directly to the south of the lake. The property to the west of the lake isn't really the concern because that does not butt up to any of their housing. Mm-hmm. So my suggestion is that we commit to that portion, which I believe is, I'm guessing about an acre, maybe 2 acres, that is right there to the south of the lake.
I guess Matt's question, because right now we're following the ordinance of doing the 20 feet.
Yeah.
Can we mow more than what the ordinance says, or do it without changing the ordinance?
I don't think we should be, going out. I mean, I think what you're talking, there's 2 different questions. Whether we're doing it as a nuisance abatement under our ordinances, we're just going out and abating a nuisance, which we're permitted to do, or whether we are mowing private property because it's an eyesore in the city, not necessarily a nuisance, as our ordinances define.
I think
I mean,
the
that's
nuisance would be rodents and rodents coming out of
I
it.
mean, we're allowed to abate nuisances other than, high grass. But, I mean, the procedures can be different for the nuisances that we're allowed to abate. So if there's a nuisance of rodents, I mean, we're allowed to go out there and abate that. But, I mean, I think what we've got is high grass, right?
No, it's not just high grass, it's rodents and snakes and rats and that are coming up into the yards.
Yeah, I mean, we can abate those things. I mean, we're allowed to do that. We just need to go through the codes inspection process, I think, to do that. If we're gonna do it without permission.
Yeah. I don't know that mowing farther back is going, I mean, that's we do, I mean, I understand that there's rodents and snakes that get up in there. I have the same issue, and I live about 3 blocks away from a creek. I don't know that cutting the grass all the way back to the pond is I think that's a stretch. And using public taxpayer funds to mow an area, I think you're really crossing a line between public and private property ownership.
I would agree with that under most circumstances, except the fact that we have an owner who has not taken responsibility. We're saying that we've got liens against the property, yet we're saying that we don't even want to foreclose on the property because we want to deal with it. But yet the residents have to deal with it.
I don't know that we're not willing to foreclose on it. We're just not to that point yet, are we? I mean, I don't think because, I don't know.
I don't know, I would have to look at what exact liens were filed, but,
Yeah.
I mean, you can try to foreclose.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
I mean, but then, I mean, if he's got debt on the property, all that has to be paid first. So I just don't know the situation.
Has he talked to us at all about it? I mean, have we gotten a hold of him?
About getting it done?
Yeah, about anything over there. Because I think
trying
there's
to get it
stuff
done,
on the other
yeah.
side too that are issues, right?
Well, there's cement.
Some storm boxes or something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is he paying his taxes, his property taxes?
I don't, I haven't.
Because the county will foreclose too. Not much of any.
Yeah, it's ag property. I mean, the concrete boxes, I don't know if we could do anything with that at this point, just because that's infrastructure that's been sitting out there since, Tebby originally planned on building that entire subdivision, but storm boxes and culverts is or storm boxes that we're talking about there. I don't know that I don't know that anybody's reached out to Mr. Lorino, and asked whether whether he is willing to get rid of the property. I know that.
I was gonna say, probably 2 or 3 years ago, I reached out to him, because at that time, I had heard that the HOA had a desire to take it over to include the tennis courts. At that time, I don't think he wants it. It serves no purpose for him, but I passed that information along. I don't know where that went.
Well, maybe the solution is that we reach out to Mr. Lorino again and see if he has an interest in unloading the property. If that's the case, I mean, I'd be satisfied with recommending that we take the property over. Absolutely, we're not paying him anything for it. But
Shannon, can you think back to when the average one went to the Parks Board, what their hesitation was to taking that property?
Well, from a park and recreation standpoint, I mean, I had one of our park board members here tonight.
I could address that. He wanted to unload that onto the park board, and we declined because it's a piece of crap. Bottom line, it would have cost us more than what we take in about 5 years in taxes to make the park board run. And he wanted to, I think he excavated to the west of that tennis court, and he sounded like a nice lake, and, to the east was a swamp. And the tennis courts are falling apart, and that's why I say it's a piece of crap. And we, unanimously, well, actually, every one of us voted it down to accept it. So he would probably be more than happy to unload that onto the city, and probably wouldn't cost anything. However, park board did not want it.
I think ultimately the recreational value or benefit to the community versus the maintenance costs annually to maintain that property, as well as the aged and past its useful life infrastructure like the courts, the fencing around the courts, basketball goal there, a sidewalk that leads from the dead end to the courts. In addition to, obviously, the water features that were around it, the swamp to the east and the creek to the north, and the constant flooding that goes kind of all around in that area. We realized this would not be a destination park, and that ultimately, if we did sink that kind of money and that annual maintenance into that property, it would really just be serviceable to those that were in essence within walking distance to the property. And so again, thinking as a whole, or for the entire city, in that, is this going to be a value for everyone, and is the recreation going to be there for the costs that are involved? And it was ultimately decided that we weren't interested.
Is the homeowners association interested in that land at all?
I don't even know anymore. At one time, George, my issue is that at some point, the city had agreed with this contractor to dig this hole for the dirt for the movie theater, and now the place kind of went to hell. I mean, I got rats, I got pictures on my phone I can show you I killed right there on my front porch. Snakes coming up in my yard. Not my problem, the city allowed that to be dug and kind of let it go. There was an agreement at some point that a park would be put in there after the guy got done digging a hole. I don't care if there's a park or not. All I care is I want snakes and rodents and all that. There is a part of y'all's ordinance that says any property, high weeds and all that, it's a nuisance, that rodents, mosquitoes, and all that, needs to be mowed. I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, the city had dropped the ball somewhere. It's not my problem. I pay taxes here. And if one of my grandkids get bit, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, all hell's gonna pay somewhere. By a snake or rodent, because the city fails to do anything about it.
What I'd like to do is, if I could, is I'd like to take a vote and just see what the board has to say, and then we can go from there.
I mean, I don't know, it's something we can,
I don't know if there's anything to vote on.
I mean, I don't wanna.
We gotta look into it more for any of us to vote, I think. Because I hate to tell you this, I live right behind the railroad tracks.
Right.
We've had copperheads and all that too. And in fact, we found 4 in the backyard. So I know what you're saying.
Right.
And it's the railroad's property, and it's also got a little stream back there that causes us some trouble, and with all the work being done, it's made everything move on a little more. So I sympathize. I think we need to talk about
I mean, I heard something about it's codes. I mean, do we need to send codes back out there looking not just for the grass and weeds, but for the nuisance of the I mean, I don't know how you look for nuisance of rodents, but I mean, I'm just trying to think of the cleanest way to make sure all bases are covered.
We decide the property owner with the ordinance violation if there are ordinance violations that are found out there. I mean, he can be cited. I don't know where he lives, whether you can really drag him into, municipal court or not is probably impractical, but I mean, we
I'm
can't.
just trying to think of
I mean, that's what we
way.
normally do if we've got landowners who are violating building codes or have, you know, significant problems with properties. I mean, if they're not complying with codes department requests and letters, I mean,
Codes
we
goes
allow
out
them to
there,
cite them, yeah.
so Codes goes out there and says, okay, this is a nuisance because it's causing rodents, we're gonna cite him. He doesn't show up to court, what's in, that's a bench warrant or something, or?
There can be. The problem is he's gotta be served with the citation, and if he lives in Colorado, that creates a whole nother issue too, before there's gonna be a warrant issued. I mean, so that's just this particular issue, I mean, that's not in general, it's just because we've got an absentee owner here. But I mean, yeah, we can have the citation issued, if he comes to town, you can serve him with it, but.
Well, that's in essence what we're doing right now with the abatement process. I mean, we're issuing a citation for an ordinance violation.
We're just not going out and debating any further because
that's not the law, right?
But if we're actually citing for the rodents, we
I don't
could
know
go
what the
further,
nuisance
right?
ordinance said. I
don't know what it says about rodents.
Okay.
I don't know what it says about.
I'm just trying to think of a way that we can, because right now we're doing what the ordinance says, which is we're abating 20 feet. I'm just trying to think of the cleanest way for us to abate that other issue. Sort of.
What your code says about it.
Number 9, under whatever, unkept property, any property with an overgrowth of weeds, grass, and other vegetation, or brush, property or trash. 8.4 said, mention items have been found that would be a potential harborage place, a breeding place for mosquitoes, flies, rodents, rats, and other vermin shall be deemed nuisance. I mean, I've been battling this for 2 years. I can find you on the city hill, I don't know why y'all can't. I mean, a lot of you guys got a lot more education than I do.
Rick, Ken, my understanding of the 20-foot perimeter is that like lots like that are gonna be hayed.
It's just undeveloped. If a lot's undeveloped, then it's.
And what's this property zoned? I mean, is it zoned agricultural?
If it's that or R1. So originally, this was gonna be like the second phase of Creekside Village.
Yeah.
That was not even Lorena, that was another developer. And the storm box that they talked about was actually for the second phase.
Okay.
Literally had that out there, and the next day was gone. Then I think it went to a bank in the arena, and now there's a pond. The tennis courts that are out there were part of that village development to start with. So there's a lot of moving parts with it.
I mean,
I think to go through the abatement procedure, we need to go through the codes department. For whatever the nuisance is that out there that needs to be abated, the starting point is the codes department.
When you already have a third citation going out, right?
Well, it's already been abated, yeah, we just have to file it with the county. The problem is, in reality, you continue to do that, we can continue to put liens on there, but until the property's sold, you don't get anything back.
Yeah.
Until, if it's sold.
But then we're right back to the point where we've done all the abatements, we've done all the things that we're supposed to do. Is there any reason we can't take a vote to whether we wanna mow that property to the north of the lake? I mean, to the south of the lake.
I mean, I think we need to look at that. I need to look at that closely to see what we can do, because like Ryan said, we can't use public funds for a private purpose. And I think we need to make sure that what we're doing is actually a public purpose, meaning that there is a nuisance out there that needs to be abated. And we're doing it correctly, in that we've got permission from the landowner to get on the property, if we're not going through the codes procedure to do it.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask that we do that, and that we have a report back by the next meeting.
Yeah, we can do that.
As to where we go with that.
In longer term, assuming the property is in default or goes into default, it ends up in our lap or the county's lap, is that, can that property be fixed where it's of any value to be sold off or put to any good use for the parks? I mean, fill the hole in, you know.
How much of it was gonna be used for the second phase of Creekside Villa? I mean,
Well, it's gonna be pretty much the whole thing, but
before the hole was
still,
dug?
even with the pond, the way it was set in there, the idea was there was still room for another set of houses, like for the east-west street there, and then another street going north-south on like what would be the far west.
That was before the pond?
No, that was
After.
after.
So I mean, there's still value there for R1.
I mean, nothing was ever submitted. That was one of the ideas that he had thrown out at the time. So, yeah,
I mean, in theory, we could force, I mean, can we force the, I mean, I guess when we look at the tax they're paid on, we could probably have the county do a tax sale, correct? I mean, if they do a tax sale and someone buys it for R1.
I haven't looked at any of this, so I can't
I know.
tell you all this
It's kinda
specifics at all.
a lot of
So I need to see
speculation.
what liens were there, what was that, I mean, I
I
don't have this information.
How far do we have to go before we can force a sale? I mean, if we have 3 liens on it.
I need to look at the liens
Okay.
to see what they are exactly.
But we'll look at the abatement process, we'll look into the taxes, and then Ken and I will reach out to Mr. Lorino, see if he still has an interest to get rid of it, and we will try to come up with some sort of game plan to bring back to the board by the next board meeting. Is everybody good with that?
Right. Which is not September 11th.
Correct. Yeah.
September 25th.
The next meeting's when?
September 25th. So I have one more request, and it's about the same housing. The streets there are very narrow, and I think that this has come up once before prior to my being on the board, but, what they would like to see is at least during school pickup and drop-off, that parking only happen on those streets on one side of the street versus both sides, because the bus is not able to get through the street to drop the kids off at their regular spots. So the kids have to walk out to the main roads to get on the bus. So, I don't know what has to happen, but if we could come up with some ordinance or something for parking during certain hours, it would be helpful for those residents to be able to have their kids get on the bus safer than have to walk through the neighborhood and get to the pickup zones. Because the buses used to go through and pick the kids up.
Buses aren't one of the ones that have problems through there. You have to take fire equipment through there, and it's very narrow, and, you know,
So really,
parking on both sides.
it does need to be certain times of day, it needs to be like what Walnut Street is. And that would go with Transportation Committee first. Notify all the homeowners of it. Huh?
I think we can just do it. Yeah, you can just do it.
Okay. Well, my recommendation is the board's looking at doing that, we need to notify all those homeowners. I've been through the parking issue a couple times.
Typically,
We always get somebody who's like, we didn't know about it, and they come up here mad.
typically the way we do it, we do a petition, so property owners, 70% are in favor of it, then we sign it. Usually somebody comes to us and asks us if they wanna make it a parking example. So as long as that petition shows like 70 or 75%, we usually move forward with signing. But we don't have to do the petition, we just arbitrarily do it if it's a problem.
Well, and that's one of the things I was thinking, if we have a problem with school buses or with emergency equipment getting through there, I mean, we kind of have an obligation to make that call.
Yeah, essentially what we would do for the next meeting, we just come back with an ordinance, making no parking on that side, no parking there. Come up with section.
So Dale, does the fire truck have to park at the end and walk down then, or?
And that's not the only area we have that issue. There's several areas with long cul-de-sacs that have duplexes over off of, Snybar, that, the same issue is rampant, and it gets worse during the winter when people can't park further over because the snow banks up and it gets to the point, can't hardly get an ambulance down those streets. And so, I proposed an option a while back, but legal tells me we can't do it. Just making it a citywide ordinance that we don't park on one side of the street in each direction, and but,
Very sensitive.
Parking's been very. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know, because we're gonna, but if it's a safety issue though. Well.
Because it's not necessarily gonna change being able to go down the street, but could do kind of what we did on South and One, take the intersections and pull them out to where you make sure these buses can make the turn.
But there, I mean, it's not just turn though. Is it just the turn or just the whole?
That whole street, I mean, you get people on both sides, those, I don't know what.
I mean, even if we clear the intersection back further, you can make the turn, you still can't physically get down it.
It's pretty tough.
So we need to go parking on one side of the street then.
I mean, we could notify.
Well, yeah, no, we just want to know if I ever on the street. I understand, I mean, do we need to tackle them all? Well, no, we don't want to tackle them all at the same time, probably, because we'll have 300 people there.
All it takes is a sign at each subdivision says no parking on the north or west side of the street, citywide. You don't have to put a bunch of other signs up.
Why don't we do this? Why don't you're gonna be the sponsor of it, give the names of the street to Rick. He's gonna draft the ordinance for parking on one side of the street, but then we need to notify everyone on that street. And then if you have some other ones, why don't you get with them too, and may not do them all same meeting, because we'll have a full house to do that, with at least standing room only. So we might just have to do a street meeting for a while. Yeah. Does that sound? And I know some of those over there are gonna be virtual and stuff too, and I don't know how that works with mailings, so we may need to hang them on the door.
Yeah, generally the best method for doing that is door hangers.
All right.
Because it's the people that are actually there that you want to.
All right.
That's all for me.
All right. Alderman Headley?
Nothing at this time.
Alderman West?
Nothing at this time,
Alderman Bamman?
A couple of quick things, Mr. Mayor, update from the school district. Of course, the school year's off to a good start, normal things going on there, getting a school year off and running, but the district's moving forward with additions to the early childhood and central office expansions, and they've also put an RFQ out for a new construction management firm for an upcoming bond issue in the next phase of the high school. That's all.
All right. Next up is the mayor's report. I just had one thing, well, it all goes together. As you're aware, Grand Valley Fair is coming up on the 8th and 9th. On the 8th, we will be the city spotlight on 98.1 KMPZ, so they'll be doing their shows live from the pavilions from 10 till 6. That'll be the 8th. On the 9th, we do have the parade at 1 o'clock. The city does have a float that will be entered in that parade, so anyone who would like to ride that float, I guess let Sarah know, right, because she can order a shirt.
Yeah, I think Thursday is when she needs to notify.
Okay.
Shirt size if you want to.
Okay, so let her know. I know you'll be in the parade. Bob's gonna be driving in the parade. Those are the Well, I mean,
Driving in the park.
he's getting that fancy car out of his and driving Jim Cook.
Here is a local by.
Yeah, we'll wave at you. So, again, just, I don't know if you've been following, but I don't want to call them record amounts, because I know back when I was a kid growing up here, the fair used to be really big, but since I've been involved, I mean, we have over 80 vendor spots sold. I'm getting literally 3 a day calling me too, so that number is going to go up. I think we've filled the fairgrounds up at this point. We're in the parking lot, so some people are going to be some of the vendors will be in the parking lot.
What's the radio station?
98.1 KMTZ. If you listen to it, you'll hear you can hear us all on the radio talking to. Parade. We have this baby toddler contest that I was planning on having 15 kids in. I got 51 entries. So I've been trying to get all that. People like their babies and toddlers in this town. So yeah, it's really good. So come if you can, help if you can. I know Chris will be helping line up with the parade, and I got some forms to give you tonight. So that is all I have. We do not have a need for an exec session unless someone else does. All right, we'll adjourn.